Back in the year 1990, a new arcade cabinet called Smash TV hit the scene and became a major success in arcades across the country. This was another top-down twin-stick shooter telling the story of violent programming that dominates the TV screens in the far future of 1999. While this claim may sound a little ridiculous, it surprisingly wasn't too far from the truth, as in 1999, we saw the release of absolute carnage, like House Hunters and SpongeBob SquarePants. I was a huge fan of this game ever since I played the version of it on the Midway Original Collection that my friend owned. It was extremely fun to get together and try to beat each other's high scores, or just pop it in and blast goons for about an hour. These games were arcade staples back in the 80s and 90s. But as time went on, video games grew into a deeper and more meaningful experience. For a while there, we didn't really see any games adopting a twin-stick shooter foundation, as it seemed the big gaming companies were painting people into a box of what we should be expecting from games. However, this doesn't mean that they were unwanted, and that much was obvious, as when the indie game scene started exploding, we started to see both old and new gamers falling in love with dozens of more simple and nostalgic titles. Games like Isaac and Spelunky showed that there was still a lot of love for more arcadey style of video games. All they needed was a fresh coat of paint and some brand new ideas. This allowed people to begin to experience and appreciate this somewhat forgotten genre, as well as allow for an evolution into a new experience that has been seeing a lot of attention in the last 10 years. I'm of course talking about swarm shooters. Auto shooters, or swarm shooters as I like to call them, are in my eyes the spiritual successors to the twin-stick shooters of the ye olde days. I own a couple and played a few over the last couple of years to notice that there are a few things that they all hold in common. One, they're very cheap. I was able to pick up just 3 last week for about 15 bones. 2, they all have an element of gaining upgrades to kill bigger and bigger hordes of monsters. And finally 3, they're all roguelites with fairly short run times. All of this combines to make an extremely retro-feeling gameplay loop, one that can keep a youngin' like me hooked for hours in a dimly lit, chlamydia-ridden arcade of yore, but with the benefit of it being played from my dimly lit, chlamydia-ridden bedroom. These games are immensely satisfying, and very easy to get into, so I just wanted to show you 3 games in this video that I feel are 1, well made, and 2, simple to understand. So, let's get started, shall we? First up on the list is 20 Minutes to Dawn. This one has you starring as some witchy ladies who have to beat back the hordes of Lovecraftian monsters, as you wait for the sun to rise in a few hours.
In another few hours, the sun will rise.
Or, well, 20 minutes to be exact. During these 20 minutes, you'll have to kill as many creatures as possible to gain enough experience to level frequently, stay ahead of this game's fairly punishing difficulty curve. It's very easy to fall behind due to taking bad upgrades or not being mindful in picking up the experience orbs, that you'll eventually get overrun and killed. This would be frustrating, but due to the nature of these games and the fact that there's only a 20-minute time limit, it doesn't really feel like you wasted your time. This is a minor problem I have with a lot of other roguelikes, especially the ones where a run can last up to 2 or 3 hours. But with 20 minutes, it's easy to shake it off, as likely you are dying around 5 minutes into the run. 20 Minutes to Dawn is extremely ridiculous when it comes to the game's offensive momentum. Which, if you don't know what offensive momentum is, it's kind of like rolling a snowball down a hill into a group of innocent school children. It's not too uncommon to see a run go from this to this depending on if you're taking the right upgrades. This game is extraordinarily easy when it comes to just playing the game, so the majority of the challenge comes from understanding what upgrades have good synergy potential, and what upgrades work well with your chosen weapon and character in the run. Once you're able to understand that, you'll go from being able to only survive 5 or 10 minutes to being able to beat most of the game's harder difficulties and maps with relative ease. I'm a big fan of this system, and it honestly makes this game, as well as other swarm shooters like it, very relaxing, despite how hectic it looks. This game is probably my favorite of the three, and would highly suggest checking it out. Deep Rock Survivor is a swarm shooter spin-off of that one funny little game about dwarves that I talked about in the Horde Shooter video. If you saw that, then you get the basic concept. Space dwarves on Hox's 4, running around to collect gems and ore. There are bugs afoot you gotta shoot and gore, or else you will die. This game is probably the most interesting swarm shooter I've played, as it still follows most of the same principles as all the others, but you will not get nearly as powerful, and is very easy to get overrun. This would make the game almost impossible if it were like many of the other swarm shooters, but Deep Rock Survivor gives you the ability to destroy the walls around you. This gives you the ability to kite the enemies and evade them as you run around the map, and pick up the experience orbs and loot randomly generated around the map. This makes the enemies feel dangerous, and makes it all the more satisfying when you get to that point where you are extremely powerful, and you don't need to kite anymore. You need to earn your strength at the end of the run, and it honestly makes this game one of the harder swarm shooters I've played in quite a while. Though, this game does something that I generally don't like seeing in a lot of roguelikes. There just aren't that many cool upgrades. I think it is extremely paramount in a roguelike to have cool upgrades and items that entice the player to experiment and learn more about the game. Take Isaac, for example. There are very simple items like breakfast or growth hormones that are just simple stat ups. But there are also a wide selection of items that apply a weird effect, and cause you to play the game in a different manner, like the fire tears, or fruitcake, for example. Deep Rock Survivor has a few items that change up the game and how you do things, but the majority of your upgrades are just simple stat ups, leading to a lot of your runs feeling very similar. I love many aspects of this game, but I feel I tend to get a little bored while playing Deep Rock Survivor due to this. This game is still in early access though, so I'm hoping the devs got a little more cooking up for this game, as I feel they could have something very special soon, with a little more work. Swarm Grinder is pretty cool. This game shakes up the formula a little when it comes to swarm shooter roguelikes. Instead of the enemies swarming you, you have the option to fight as many or as little enemies as possible. But there is a catch. You'll have a fuel meter that you need to keep topped off at all times, or else you will spontaneously combust. This creates a very satisfying gameplay loop of needing to get stronger to get more fuel, and needing to get more fuel so that you can get stronger. On top of that, it takes a lot of strategy to know when and where you should be taking your upgrades, as they all have a certain fuel cost to them. So while it may seem like a good idea to take 5 skills right away, and start tricking them all out to get as strong as possible, this is terribly inefficient, and will likely lead you to dying because you can no longer support your fuel cost. All of this combines to make a very rewarding system that rewards taking risks, and as I said in the past, a good roguelike requires risk and reward. Oh yeah, before I forget, the music in this game is good as hell. Swarm Grinder feels pretty refreshing to play. as even these little changes make it feel very different compared to the rest of the swarm shooter genre. I feel I see many swarm shooters coming out nowadays that tend to feel really similar to each other. So it's nice to see some changes and new things being put into a genre that I feel can get a little stale at times. If I could change one thing about this game though, I feel it takes a little too long to unlock anything. It's not egregious or anything, but a run on average will last you around 20 to 40 minutes. And in that time, you'll generally only unlock one or two things. I also wish that there was a way to look at achievements and unlock requirements mid-run, as you can't even exit out of a run without abandoning it. All in all though, this game is really good, and very much worth your time. Hell, it's only $8 too, so you just really don't have an excuse not to buy it. I think all these games are pretty neat, and would suggest checking them out if you're a fan of this genre, or if you're just a roguelike junkie like myself. This genre as a whole, though, isn't my favorite, but I always appreciate smaller and simple games when it comes to relaxing after a hard day, and swarm shooters are always an option when it comes to that. That's all I gotta say, though. I love you, and thanks for stopping by.